with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Seth Goldstein, legal counsel for Trader Joe's United and the ALU, joins Sam in a pre-record to talk about the billionaire-funded assault on the National Labor Relations Board. And later in the show, I'll be speaking to Dr. Tarek Loubani, a Palestinian-Canadian doctor who's worked in Gaza, has been shot himself by the Israeli military in the past, updating us on Nasser Hospital and a doctor that has gone missing. Also on the show today, the U.S. vetoes a third ceasefire resolution attempting to stop Israel's genocide. The only no vote on the entire Security Council. Even the UK abstained. They're led by Tories right now. The situation in Gaza is more dire by the day. Both the World Food Program and UN suspend food deliveries due to chaos and danger faced by their workers. More reports of Israeli forces destroying food and aid convoys now being circulated in the Western press. Hundreds of Ukrainian troops have reportedly been captured in the aftermath of the Russian siege of Advika. The U.S. prepares what it calls major sanctions against Russia in the wake of Alexei Navalny's killing. Trump finally addressed that killing by comparing his legal woes to Alexei Navalny being likely murdered by his own government.
Very much on the same.
They're just the same thing. Witch hunt.
They're murdered the same way.
Trump is in more trouble in New York. Tish James says that they are prepared to seize his buildings if he refuses to pay his $355 million plus interest fine. The former FBI informant who lied, allegedly, about Hunter and Joe Biden's business dealings to fuel GOP conspiracy theories is both an Israeli citizen and now may have Russia connections as well. Trustworthy fella.
An alliance.
The Supreme Court hears oral arguments today over the Clean Air Act's Good Neighbor provision, which would force polluting states to consider the rest of the country. SCOTUS also refusing to hear the West Point affirmative action case, as well as a challenge to New York's rent stabilization law. Some good news, over 150,000 student debtors saw their balance go to zero this morning. Those who paid little debt, had little debt and had been paying for 10 years. 21 Starbucks stores announced in unison yesterday that they plan to organize. And lastly, in Oklahoma, a non-binary teen, Nex Benedict, reportedly beaten to death in a high school bathroom. Rest in peace, Nex. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's a hump day, and it's a two-hander, because it's just myself and Matt Leck today. The barest of bones, but the strongest of bones. Many people are saying no bone saw could come between us. I don't know. Here we go.
You've blown all the cool cred that your leather jacket has afforded you. The chat is alive.
Oh, they are alive.
Well,
this is my leather blazer that I do a little. Sometimes I rent clothes. This is
Looks like you're gonna go to like write up about a band or something like that. This is music journalist Emma instead of politics.
Yeah, right. I'm very official. Because I'm going to meet a friend after work today, and I can't wear my normal crap. So this makes me acceptable to go into like a restaurant. But yeah, no, I should bring back that leather jacket because it was such an iconic moment when I mistook the Fonzie signature or whatever he was doing. That was a while ago. I should bring that back. This is, I guess, a little bit of a reminder. People can look that up if they're unfamiliar. Not my finest intellectual moment for sure. But as a reminder, Sam is out this week. It's just me, and he, though, has a pre-recorded interview that's a must listen that will be playing just after this. And then I'm incredibly excited to be speaking to Dr. Loubani about his experiences in Gaza. But let's start here because, basically the entire political establishment in the United States is expressing outrage over the likely murder of Alexei Navalny by Putin or by those associated with him. I mean, there have been multiple attempts on Navalny's life. He is was the number one critic of Putin in Russian public life, and he had his own problems and problematic ties to, say, anti-Muslim racism and things like that. But it doesn't take away from like the deeply troubling and scary persecution and circumstances that Vladimir Putin's government has created within Russian society. So there are two things that can be true at once. Like Nancy Pelosi posing with Alexei Navalny's widow is clear propaganda for the United States, and it's also an indicator as to how truly repugnant this Putin regime is.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we started yesterday with the context of the Julian Assange case. No American has any right, in my opinion, to lament Navalny if they are supportive of what's happening, what America's doing to Assange.
Yes.
So
they're similar in
their character doesn't matter, right?
Right.
It's like they are persecuted by major states on this planet because they exposed things and were dissidents, frankly. And yeah,
I don't think that's a complicated notion that people can grasp here.
There's a wider principle.
Exactly.
There are wider principles at stake here.
Exactly. So putting that aside, right? As I said, basically the entire political class is expressing outrage about this in the United States. With the exception of a few Republicans. J.D. Vance is leading the fight in the Senate to not send any more money to Ukraine. Other Republicans who are trying to fashion themselves as paleo-conservatives, whatever the hell that really means in practice, are
conservatives that like dinosaurs? No,
yes.
Unfortunately, it's not that. It's about racism.
It would be so much cooler. But they're either silent or kind of stepping around this topic. Trump, though, decided that he finally should address it. And on Truth Social and during a town hall last night, he compared his legal battles in the United States to Navalny, again, who was just killed almost certainly by his own government. Just exactly like me. And that's so silly. It barely requires any kind of rebuttal. But Nikki Haley is getting increasingly desperate because the South Carolina primary is on Saturday. She is down by a margin of 2-1 in her home state, where she was the governor, the executive of that state in that position. She's down 2-1 to Donald Trump, and she's still raising money. Reportedly, she's been fundraising in Texas, raking in the millions, and I think it's reflective in the way that she is kind of steering her opposition to Trump here. This was her at a rally yesterday in South Carolina, trying to differentiate herself from Trump here by supporting Alexei Navalny and not supporting Putin. Here she goes speaking to this one is her speaking to Martha McCallum. There's a second one. Let's do the second one, then we'll do this as well, because she kind of just hints at it here in the speech in South Carolina, and then she gets a little bit more explicit on Fox News. So, yeah, speaking in Greenville, South Carolina, she alludes to Russia when speaking about Trump.
But 10 days after South Carolina, another 21 states and territories will vote. People have a right to have their voices heard. And they deserve a real choice, not a Soviet-style election where there's only one candidate and he gets 99% of the vote.
What's funny about that is that it's actually quite literally not a Soviet-style election in the way that she's trying to allude. The voters in the Republican base have made their preference incredibly clear. Putting aside the jingoism that is just so inherent, like, what she's alluding to is that it's a rigged election. Oh, yeah. Are you trying to claim that it's rigged in favor of Donald Trump? I've got news for you. There is absolutely zero evidence that would show that. And is she claiming that?
Yeah, this is like, where's our managed democracy at?
Yes.
Why is there no room for the backroom candidate that all the power elites choose?
What is she talking about? The Republican field just narrowed down from a bunch of nobodies that no one cared about. If it was an election that, was just about coronating Donald Trump, Soviet style, as she'd say, again, a not so subtle allusion to Russia here, then none of those candidates would have been running. No, the reality is that they all dropped out because they ran out of money after their donors figured out this is going to be Trump and the Republican base doesn't want anybody else. So, in fact, it's democracy at work. But then again, she went on Fox News with Martha McCallum and was a little bit more explicit in just tying Trump to Russia.
In terms of the former president talking about himself, he did that when he raised this question about what he thought about the killing of Alexei Navalny, which I know is a situation that you have watched very closely in Russia. And it's not, just about the tragic death that he suffered. It's about the implications of Putin's plans for other people. There are 2 Americans that are being held. Put that back up again. He said the sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what's happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression with crooked, radical left politicians and prosecutors and judges. What do you think about that, Governor?
That just makes my point. It's amazing that here's a hero who challenged Putin, lost his life because of it. This is on the heels of Trump saying that he would encourage Putin to invade any NATO countries that didn't pull their weight. And now the only comment he's going to make about Navalny is not hitting Putin for murdering him, not praising Navalny for fighting the corruption that was happening in Russia, but instead he's going to compare himself to Navalny and the victim that he is in his court cases. That is my point. He is so distracted. He is so focused on himself. And America can't go through this. We won't survive it. He's going to spend this entire year in a courtroom. There is a reason Biden and the Democrats so desperately want Trump to be the candidate for the Republican Party. It's because they know they can beat him. They've beat him multiple times over and over again. We need to start saying, what does it take to win? Because we can't fix this country if we don't win.
She has a point there, but you can't do anything if you don't win, Nikki. So the bind that Republicans are in, and the only thing saving them is the fact that Biden is an octogenarian who keeps slurring his words and making mistakes and is supporting a genocide and running to the right on the border and doing everything possible to alienate the base that he needs to win this election, which I'm praying he does, because God forbid another Trump term. It's scary. But what is she doing here? I've got think about this for a second. This was Hillary Clinton's strategy in 2016 in the general election from the Democratic side. talking about how Trump is connected to Russia. Trump and Russia, Trump and Russia. Now, there is some appetite for that in an MSNBC viewing base, right? Like, they don't like Russia. They get energized by the rivalry, the kind of Cold War framework that they apply to it. And those are usually older liberals that are going to vote Democrat anyway. What Republican voter, like, is there one in the country that is swayed by Donald Trump not being vocal about the killing of Alexei Navalny? Which one? Because it's the donors that she's talking to. Yeah. She's spending all of her time raising as much money as she can so she can get through South Carolina and still run on Super Tuesday, when she will get demolished then, and the race will be mathematically completely over at that point, as opposed to just over in principle. So this is indicative of a huge disconnect that Republicans voters also don't like, which is the sense that she is in a room with a bunch of donors talking about Alexei Navalny and, hey, we're trying to stop these Mexican rapists from coming over the border here, Nikki. This is our thing. Yeah. So this is just not something that is going to work at all. And, you know, Tim Scott was saying yesterday that Nikki Haley is desperate. That's true. Tim Scott would know. But I wish that she was going out with a little bit more of a spicy kind of attack than something that just got recycled from her friends over at Boeing.
Well, Trump shows that he like their incoherence, because it's like, you can't, like I said, the Assange thing, if you support the persecution of Assange because he exposed American war crimes, you can't be us. There's going to be nobody here for your champion of other dissidents. It just doesn't make sense. So Trump, actually, he's not being silent about Navalny. He's saying, he's saying like, I'm him.
I'm him.
And that's as coherent as what Nikki Haley says.
Yes, right. Exactly. So it's she's keeping going for some reason. Again,
well, you got
she's the
payroll.
Fourth round quarterback starting at the end of the year on this team that's going, 5-12 or something like that, seeing if she can be the starter in 2028.
She might have a Kurt Warner moment.
Yeah. From bagging groceries to funding a genocide. That's the Nikki Haley experience. All right, folks. One word from our sponsor, and then you will hear an interview with Sam that Sam conducted with Seth Goldstein. But first, let's face it. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. This is... Apologies. I think I have the wrong paper in front of me. Everybody, just give me 1 second. I have it right here, actually. So, this episode is brought to you by Zippix Nicotine Toothpicks. Zippix brings you a totally satisfying, convenient, and great tasting way to curb your nicotine cravings. Don't you think it's time to stop putting smoke and vape oil in your lungs? It's not good for you, but yeah, it's difficult to stop or curb your habit. Now you can get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere without having to rely on smoking or vaping. Zippix Toothpicks gives you an easier, healthier, and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 great flavors, and they have options in 2 milligrams and 3 milligrams of nicotine. Zippix are perfect for flights, sporting events, restaurants, and literally anywhere that smoking and vaping are banned. They're also one of the most cost-effective nicotine products on the market. It just helps you get your nicotine fix when you're trying to not smoke or vape, and you're not in the place where you can. And you're just trying to be a little bit healthier as well. Zippix also offers caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks if you are not a nicotine user or if you're trying to get away from your nicotine habit. Zippix have already helped tens of thousands of customers in leading a healthier lifestyle, and if you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy and try Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vape, and get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. And, it's just helpful when you have a little bit, you're used to having a cigarette in your mouth or maybe a vape, and you're craving some nicotine. Zippix is a healthier, wonderful alternative to that so that you can begin to start to develop healthier habits. Get 10% off your first order by using code MAJORITY10 at checkout. Your lungs will be glad you did. Must be 21 or older to order. Warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Again, that's 10% off your first order by using the code MAJORITY10 at checkout. MAJORITY10 at checkout. Zippix, Zippix, nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less with nicotine. Zippix nicotine toothpicks. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, Sam will be speaking to you from the past with Seth Goldstein.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining me now, attorney Seth Goldstein. He is a partner at Julian, Mirror, Singla, and Goldstein in New York. He is representing the Amazon Labor Union and Trader Joe United workers as well. Seth, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
A couple of days ago, we're actually recording this on Saturday of this prior week. But this last week, Amazon became the third major corporation to challenge the National Labor Relations Board and its constitutionality. Take us back to where this started. It started with SpaceX, Elon Musk's space corporation, I guess. Walk us through this.
Actually, it started before SpaceX. It started really with the election of the Amazon Labor Union in 2022, because after the election, Amazon brought objections to the National Labor Relations Board. And they started bringing up these issues in their objections regarding the violations of the National Labor Relations Board. And this quickly caught on to right-wing media. It was in the Wall Street Journal. I believe some of the Republican congressmen started questioning the National Labor Relations Board. So I think the genesis of that was with that election, and then it came over to SpaceX more recently.
And we should say there's also sort of, we're in an environment, if you will, in sort of a milieu where the conservatives, Republicans, many of the conservative courts are beginning an assault on the administrative state. And it's coming out in the context of the non-delegation principle or the Chevron doctrine, also under assault. We recently had a case that was argued in front of the Supreme Court. We're going to find that the results of that, I guess, in June or so. There was also a case, Sela, I believe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and Jarksy, which was a case that is challenging the authority of the SEC. All right, but let's go to SpaceX is the first one that really sort of like Amazon introduces this idea. SpaceX, apparently there was some employees who wrote a letter saying that they were concerned about Elon Musk's stewardship of that company, and they were fired. They went to the National Labor Relations Board. SpaceX, in part of their defense, was to question the constitutionality of the National Labor Relations Board. Before we get to what SpaceX did, from what statutory authority, just give us a little bit of history, the board itself and the National Labor Relations Act that created it.
So the National Labor Relations Act was created in 1935. It was a law that was a compromise really between labor and management, because at the time there were national strikes. And the thought was that, you needed a process in order to protect employees' rights and also institutionalize the conflict between labor and management. The law has been in effect for 89 years. There were changes in 1947 called Taft-Hartley, but the law has pretty much remained the same, which provides its own problems because the law never envisioned tech workers and other types of workers that were not around in 1935. But for the most part, it's worked. And the issue has been, I think, that up till now, at least in the last 70 years or 60 years, the National Labor Relations Board hasn't really done a lot. And the penalties are very, very light. And the board, for the most part, hasn't been very aggressive. So now that the board is going back to the principles of the 1930s, which is to encourage organizing and unionizing, all of a sudden the right wing has a problem with it. And that's what I think the genesis is, that when the women at SpaceX spoke out, Elon Musk immediately employed a union-busting law firm called Morgan Lewis. Morgan Lewis represents Amazon, Trader Joe's, Tesla, as well as SpaceX to do their dirty work.
And we should say that there was, the law was passed in 1935. My understanding is in 1937, I think it was, the Supreme Court essentially heard a case as to the constitutionality of the National Labor Relations Board and decided, and I think it was a 5-4 decision, that yes, it passes constitutional muster. So this has been adjudicated. Of course, we have a court that just reversed a 50-year individual right that's existed in this country for 50 years. So I'm not convinced that they're necessarily bound by, in their minds, by a 90-year-old precedent. But with that said, walk us through what the case that the SpaceX is trying to make here. My understanding is there's essentially 3 points that they're doing. Steel man their case to a certain extent, if you could, to the extent that one can without contemplating who sits on the Supreme Court.
Well, and also with a straight face, because these are ridiculous arguments. First is that the law is unconstitutional because the president can't remove ALJs and board members, that they have merit board protection. And they believe that that violates the separation of powers, that the president should be able to remove these individuals. The second issue is...
I just want to stay there for a second. So you have, is it 6 members of the National Labor Relations Board? Or
5 members of
5
the
members.
National Labor Board, and administrative law judges who are basically fact finders for the agency that look at the cases before it goes to the National Labor Relations Board.
So SpaceX is arguing that it's unconstitutional because you need cause to fire them as opposed to simply at will or at whim, I guess. But don't we have civil service workers, tens of thousands of civil service workers in the government who also you cannot dismiss without cause?
Absolutely. And judges can't be dismissed without, being impeached. I mean, the whole purpose of these rules are to guarantee the independence of these judges. So it seems to me to be ridiculous to say that they're unconstitutional because we're trying to give independence to these judges to make decisions that may, not actually agree with the National Labor Relations Board, with the president, whoever the president is, or, with the whims of the public demand. I mean, you want your judges to be independent, right?
One would think. And we should also say this is where that case regarding the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau becomes somewhat relevant in the SEAL law, because even in addressing the question of the constitutionality of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It said that if you have an agency or expert agencies, this one being in labor law, they reiterated that it's legitimate that they can only be removed by good cause by the president. And so this is not that long ago. Right? I mean, we're talking a matter of months that they have basically reiterated this principle.
Yeah, I mean, this is not some grand constitutional issue. You can always find fault with a brief that starts off with a quote with Alexander Hamilton and the Federalist Papers. I mean, really, are we dragging up 18th century principles, which may be good for a modern day agency that's worked for 89 years? I mean, it's rather fishy, right?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, but that's the era that we're living in, right? Like this is where the fishiest of claims can get to the Supreme Court and they can ignore what they said 6 months later. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in this case, but I guess it's the magnitude of the threat, or I should say the implications of this threat that are really at play here. But before we get to that part of it, let's talk about the second claim. That is that it violates the Seventh Amendment right to trial by a jury.
Right. This is an extraordinary position because basically Elon Musk is saying, and Trader Joe's, and I guess Amazon is saying that before you impose any penalties on us, consequential damages, in the case of Trader Joe's, the right to get reimbursed a 401k benefit that they were deprived of while the union people non-union people got it, that we have to now have a trial. Well, there's problems with that. Number one is the legislation never included trials. We in the labor bar would love the right to sue a company individually. We don't have that in the a right of action. We don't have that in the legislation. So what are they worried about? And also it's important to point out that the federal courts have jurisdiction over the board. So someone that's not happy with the rulings can always go to federal court, and they can go all the way up to the Supreme Court
to appeal. Okay, and so let me just unpack this a little bit for folks who are less aware of this. So there are instances, like you say, if the National Labor Relations Board determines that there has been unfair labor practices or there's been unjust firings as retribution maybe for union organizing, they can not only say you got to give them their job back, you not only got to give them back pay, but maybe they suffered some type of medical condition because of this, or they lost 401k payments. We got to make them whole in this instance. And SpaceX is arguing, well, if you're going to do that, you need to take us in front of a jury. You need to take us to trial with a jury as opposed to an administrative judge. But this, I mean, and again, like you say, there's no cause of action. I mean, I would imagine it would be a fantasy of yours to be able to go and take Trader Joe's and do discovery on them and to sue them for against the National Labor Relations Act, because it's quite clear there's violations here. Their whole strategy is just to play out the clock. I mean, that might be a good trade if you could you'd be in the plaintiff's attorney business, and I'm surprised that they would do that. But don't we also have administrative aspects of this across the government in many respects?
Yes, in every agency, in the Department of Labor, EPA, there are all types of administrative law judges that have been doing their job professionally for many, many decades. And the fact of the matter is I mean, if you want me to, I could talk about the consequences.
Please.
That if Elon Musk and the Federal Society and Heritage have their way, and a judge issued a preliminary injunction, even if it was on this issue, even if it was just for SpaceX, it would bring the machinery of the National Labor Relations Board to a halt. That would mean that administrative law judges could no longer issue decisions, that they are, in a sense, unconstitutional. So if they're unconstitutional, then I imagine that employers will go and seek injunctions in other courts in order to stop these unlawful proceedings that they would tell the court. And then they might even go for restitution against people that got awards from the board, because they would consider that to be unlawful.
Retroactively.
Absolutely.
I mean, theoretically, you could go back 80 years.
Yeah, and 6 years in New York,
Okay, so there's a statute of limitations, but
I mean, so if I got an award in 2018 from the board, collected it, that company could be at my doorstep saying, I want my money back. And, where would that leave people? I mean, essentially what you're saying is you have no rights. There's another issue here that I think is very important, and I think really worries me. It hasn't been talked about.
Wait, I want to just get to the third claim, if we can,
okay,
of SpaceX, so we can sort of put their sort of like full case to rest. But they also argue ultimately that the separation of powers is being violated because there's an executive, judicial, and legislative functions within the National Labor Relations Board. And I guess you have the question of like the non-delegation principle as to whether the National Labor Relations Board can assess what is a unfair labor practice, or what's the best and what's the best remedy if they find that there's an unfair labor practice. I guess executive is that they actually carry these things out. I mean, so what is your sense of what's your response to that argument?
So that's really an attack on what's called 10J injunctions. The current process at the board is that if the board decides that you need an injunction, that means someone that has unlawfully been fired, and that they have to be brought back to work. Then what happens is the board, that the region where the case is brought, goes to the general counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, for permission to do it. And then Jennifer Abruzzo has to go to the board to get approval as well. And then once that approval is provided, then the region can seek an injunction. So that's their argument with the third prong of their argument. It's not a really great argument because, number one, the law firm that's bringing this lawsuit has two former board members, John Ring and Philip Miscamara, and a board member, Harry Johnson III. And they all went through this process, and they didn't have a problem with it when they were working for the National Labor Relations Board. There's also walls between these aspects of the agency. And, these walls have been around for a long time. So there isn't a situation where there's undue influence by the region on the full board. So I don't understand what the issue is, except they don't like the decisions of the board.
Right. Okay. So let's, that's the case, and you did a good job of presenting it with a straight face. what are the implications of if the court? I mean, like, where is this in the legal process at this point, and then where could it go, and what could happen?
Okay, so in SpaceX, as of yesterday, the judge had, or the day before, the judge in Texas transferred the case to California, to the Central District of California. Yesterday, Morgan Lewis lawyers filed a 56-page mandamus to the Fifth Circuit claiming that the judge made an erroneous decision by transferring it. So they're just spinning paperwork to try to keep it in Texas because they think that in Texas they would get a favorable result. I will also say that I am very troubled by the fact that they went to Texas originally and not California, where the firing occurred, because they were engaged in what we call in the legal profession forum shopping.
Right. They're looking for judges. We know that, like, you know, and I think my audience understands that, you know, federal judges that come from a specific state, even if they're federal judges, the senators there have an undue influence as to who gets nominated in those areas. They can withhold a blue slip, et cetera, et cetera. So these jurisdictions tend to be much more conservative. Much more of these judges have been appointed by Trump over the years, or Bush over the years, or people who are hostile to labor rights. Okay, so it goes, if it winds its way up through the case, like let's say just even if, I think that's the Fifth Circuit in Texas. Let's say the Fifth Circuit decides that, yes, the National Labor Relations Board is unconstitutional because one of these arguments are compelling. What happens then?
It would cause chaos. We were worried up till a couple days ago that the judge in Texas might issue what's called a preliminary injunction. And we were concerned that if a preliminary injunction was,
issued,
that not only would the trial that's set in California for March 5th on SpaceX stop, but also at that point, like I said before, the management bar would be going to other courts seeking injunctions against trials that are currently occurring at the board. There probably would be an injunction against the board members issuing any further decisions at the board. So all of these things were very, very troublesome in SpaceX. So let's talk about Trader Joe's. In Trader Joe's, there is a trial that's occurring in Hartford, Connecticut, in Region 1. It involves the Hadley store, which was the first Trader Joe's United store that organized. And at the beginning of the trial on January 16th, Morgan Lewis's attorney, Chris Murphy, and Kelsey Phillips, who previously worked as an honors attorney at the board, amended what's called an answer, and they included the SpaceX arguments. But they never filed formally an amended answer. So the only reason we found out about it was because some of our members were present and reported back to us that Chris Murphy was questioning the National Labor Relations Board's constitutionality.
So it's possible that this is happening in Trader Joe's. So, like, broader strokes for us here. What is it possible we're going to see a similar assault from Trader Joe's on the National Labor Relations Board in Connecticut? And in which case, and again, this is a federal court, in which case that same danger exists?
So let me be clear about this. What Trader Joe's did was they filed what's called an affirmative defense, which they then can appeal through the National Labor Relations Board up through the federal courts to the Supreme Court, theoretically. And this has also been done with Amazon. So with Amazon, because I represent Amazon Labor Union, we have a trial set in Brooklyn regarding unlawful terminations of Amazon workers who were engaged in concerted activity after the 2022 election. And also we have currently a complaint issued regarding some of the changes that were made after the election. So a couple days ago, the attorneys for Amazon also issued an amended answer in which they included the SpaceX argument.
So a similar dynamic. All right. So big picture here, because we just got about a minute left. Big picture, this is something that we can anticipate to start to see, I would imagine, from all, more than just these three corporations. This is a question that they're driving to either be answered at a circuit court level, in which case it could wreak havoc at the very least within that circuit, which makes up multiple states, depending on which one it is. And then it would, I would imagine, have to go rather quickly to the Supreme Court, because you can't have one National Labor Relations Act in Texas, Louisiana, and whatever it is, and then a different one that exists in California or in Minnesota, and then I guess it's in front of the Supreme Court, and then I don't know. It feels like it's a roulette wheel sometimes as to what this Supreme Court will do. Last word in terms of what we should be watching for, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. This is not a constitutional issue. This is an assault on worker protections and our labor movement. They're not happy about the successes our labor movement has had in organizing. This makes the 2024 election very important, because I believe that the extreme right wing is banking on Trump winning the election. They can clear out the administrative law judges that have civil service protection and really destroy the regulatory framework in the United States. So don't believe the lies about this being a constitutional issue. This is an assault on workers.
Seth Goldstein from Julian, Amira, Singlet, and Goldstein. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
We are back, and we are joined now by Dr. Tarek Loubani, Palestinian-Canadian doctor who has done a lot of work in Gaza, in the West Bank over the years, including very recently. His organization, GLIA, provides life-saving service in Gaza, the West Bank, and more. Dr. Loubani, I'm honored that you came on the program. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, you're an emergency physician. You're normally in Ontario, but you have traveled to and done work in Gaza for over a decade. You have been jailed multiple times by the IDF, by the Israelis. You have also been shot by the IDF and you recovered. Speak about your experience, if you could.
Really, when we talk about what's happening right now, it is something that we've been seeing for many years. I've been going there, as you mentioned, for over a decade as a doctor. And before then, I'd been going as well as a human rights observer. Nothing we're seeing right now is new. So when we talk about what's happening in Nasser Hospital at the moment, really what's happening in Nasser Hospital has been happening all the way through the war, but also over the past years and decades. When you mention me getting shot, for example, well, that's something that the Israelis have done a lot of. They've shot and killed many medical providers before this war. When I was shot, I was in clear medical garb, helping civilians who were unarmed during a peaceful protest, and I still got shot. That day, in 2018, 19 medical personnel were shot, one of whom, Musa Abu Hassanin, a good friend of mine and colleague, was killed. So what Israel is doing today in Nasser Hospital is just following the exact same playbook that they've followed many times before. They've shot doctors in Nasser, they've wounded doctors in Nasser, and of course they've cut off the ability to care for patients in Nasser, which is a microcosm of what they've been doing for years and decades.
Can you speak more about the Great March of Return in 2018, the peaceful protest that Palestinians organized to fight for their rights? There's a lot of conversation in the media about how the terrorist ideology within Palestinians is so difficult to weed out and that they're inherently violent and want to inflict violence upon Jews. But as you say, during that time when you were shot, this was a mass mobilization for peaceful protest.
Absolutely. The Great March of Return was a civil society initiative that was launched by a poet and a bunch of people from civil society. They understood full well that the West has certain expectations of what resistance looks like. The Palestinians have a very rich history of nonviolent demonstrations, general strikes, protests, and that's dating all the way to the 1930s when it was the British who were the occupiers. So they know how to do this. They would march, sometimes with their hands raised towards the wall, which was keeping them in the largest open-air prison in the world. And they were shot by their thousands. There were at least 6,000 people who were shot by live fire, approximately 25,000 people who were wounded during weekly protests in which nobody brought a gun. The worst that happened were some stones being thrown here and there, which I think in reality we can recognize as a symbolic act of resistance. When I was there, when I got shot, and when I watched people get shot, there were hardly even anything that you might associate with violence. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, burning tires is violence. Sure, well, that wasn't there when I got shot. Sometimes people say that throwing rocks is violence. Well, that wasn't there when I got shot either. These are excuses, lies, and fabrications that the Israelis present just like they're presenting right now in Nasser. In order to get to the point where the protesters were directly confronting the Israeli military, you had to walk through all of the pieces of civil society. There was theater, there was play, there was historical discussions about what was going on. The Palestinians were trying to reclaim their dignity and some of the land, the so-called buffer zone that existed. The same tactics were used then as are being used now. So, for example, when I was shot, the Israelis said, no, you weren't shot. Okay, so obviously it's not very hard to prove that I was shot. And so then they moved on to the next step. Well, it was the Palestinians who shot you. I mean, that was also very easy to disprove. The United Nations ran an investigation in which I was one of the named victims, the only named victim, because people were so afraid. And they through their investigation, could prove that it was the Israelis who had in fact shot. And so then we moved on to further lies and prevarications. So what we saw then with somebody like me, the only reason we can talk about it really is because I'm Canadian, is what we're seeing now. The doctors who are there are being told that they're terrorists. That happened to me, by the way. If you look up my name, there's people who call me a Hamas agent for having been a doctor practicing medicine. And so they're doing the same to the doctors in Nasser now. In fact, they've said that these are terrorists dressed up. And at the same time, when the doctors do get shot, they say, oh, it wasn't us, it was the Palestinians. Except that the Palestinians are not rolling around in tanks, are not firing shells, are not flying quadcopters with guns and other dystopian things like that.
Nasser obviously is in a dire situation right now. What have you been hearing about the situation on the ground? And is it fair to say that Nasser is really the only hospital left standing in Gaza, and it's barely standing at that per reports?
Nasser is now destroyed. There's no definition, I think, by which we can say that Nasser is a functioning hospital. The Israelis had cut off all materiel to the hospital. There were convoys, only a couple of which had succeeded in bringing in any supplies at all. The latest convoy that finally managed to get in was a WHO convoy to evacuate patients. And what they said they saw was some of the worst conditions that are imaginable. The patients, there are approximately 200 patients there, just awaiting their fate, being cared for by 5 doctors. These are the sickest patients, patients that usually have a ratio of 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. And so these are very sick patients. Already at least 8 that we know of have died, were cut off from communication. So the number is likely already higher. They've died because of a lack of electricity. They've died because of a lack of food. The Israelis are not allowing the medical teams to freely travel in and out of the hospital to provide care. And they are not providing care themselves, instead shooting at some of the providers and shooting at some of the patients.
Can you speak about some of your colleagues that have been shot, have been killed, and then also, of course, the news over the past few days that Dr. Khalid al-Sur has been missing for many days at this point and is presumed abducted by Israeli forces?
Yeah, Khalid al-Sur, the best case scenario for Dr. Khalid is that he has been detained, arrested, and is being tortured. That is the best case scenario right now. And that is appalling. That is appalling. Absolutely unacceptable. So I think the way that we have to really look at this is that the Israelis, in committing these war crimes, are really setting a new definition for what's acceptable in war. If we as an international community allow these attacks on hospitals and on medical personnel, then what we are doing is we are setting in motion the possibility for other countries to do the same thing. We're creating new norms of war, and we absolutely have to fight that tooth and nail. Dr. Khalid, we know him. He's one of many doctors there, but we know him because he's been particularly active in terms of social media. And so Dr. Khalid has been relaying minute to minute and day to day exactly what he's going through. However, the news that we haven't received, so many of my colleagues have been abducted. I'm in emergency medicine, and so we tend to be the last doctors out of the building. And so some of them, including a student of mine, have been arrested. When people have gotten word out about what's going on, it has been things that one can barely imagine. For example, the head of Shifa, Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, was made to walk on his hands and feet like a dog on a leash to eat food from the ground while naked in front of other prisoners. These are the reports that are coming out, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying, and unfortunately, it's credible. It's credible because these are not the first reports. These reports have been coming out for, again, years and decades. Even the United Nations has found significant amounts of sexual abuse of prisoners, including women, in the jails. So I'm very worried about the patients who are there in Nasser. I'm deeply concerned about the patients who are there. The patients will die. These are the sickest patients. Otherwise, they would have been extracted by their families, would have left under their own steam if they could. They are being cared for by too few doctors, and those doctors are themselves at deep risk. They've seen their colleagues go missing. Many of them have been arrested. We've seen photos from another hospital just up the street, Al Amal Hospital, in which the same thing has happened. It simply cannot be allowed to pass. We cannot allow the Israelis to set a new standard for this kind of depraved warfare while we all just sit there and watch.
Is it, in your opinion, medically? I understand that this is an international law term, but is it your opinion that a genocide is underway?
Yeah, absolutely. These are not words that we take lightly. It's not a word I've ever used before. However, in this war, at a certain point, we had to conclude that indeed it's a genocide. We had to agree with the historians. Before that, maybe there was some disagreement because of the pace of the genocide. Maybe there was some disagreement because the intent of the Israelis was, only so clear. I think it was always relatively clear they wanted a genocide, but it wasn't always clear that they were enacting a genocide. However, over the last few months, there is simply no doubt. Scholars, I'm not a genocide scholar, so I looked to genocide scholars, and they all say that this is a case of textbook genocide. Israeli scholars, Palestinian scholars, international scholars. It's not really limited. Anybody with any iota of decency and looking at the history and looking at what genocide means has declared this a genocide. And now we're in the process of getting it declared at the highest level. The International Court of Justice will find this a genocide. Unless they are completely morally bankrupt, they will find this a genocide. But after what? We can't wait 4 years when patients like in Nasser are dying today, when doctors are being abducted today. And it's not like we have no power over this. The United States can end this today. They truly can. The EU might take a little bit longer, but also has significant things that they can bring to bear. And my country, Canada, also is able to make a difference. These countries aren't just supporting genocide quietly. They're supporting genocide actively. They are blocking international institutions that will hold Israel accountable, such as the United Nations Security Council, which is literally being vetoed by the states. They are stopping accountability at almost every level while also continuing the suppression of Palestinians. Like protests here in which we're trying to support Palestinians are being actively policed, actively suppressed. I have charges because there's an allegation that I sprayed ketchup on a member of parliament's office to protest the genocide. Why? Why are there criminal charges for that? So, and we're seeing that that's, again, a microcosm of what's happening to many people all across the world, where protest is being criminalized and we're asking for Palestinian dignity and human rights is being criminalized.
What does genocide look like medically? What are the images that you see that you want people to understand that it looks like in practice from a doctor's perspective?
Genocide is absolutely gruesome. And we've seen it in the history books. We are making history now. And that's why what we're seeing looks like it's from the history books. Our teams that are on the ground in Gaza right now, and by the way, I'm not allowed to go. I got arrested and deported when I was trying to go to Gaza because the authorities knew I was trying to go and help. Only that. So the teams that have arrived there, they measure, for example, extreme malnutrition using a kind of tape that UNICEF issues called the MUAC tape. This tape is no longer sufficient. Nobody is out of the severe malnutrition category. And so it makes it difficult for us to discriminate. Genocide looks like children dying of malnutrition. Every doctor who is in a hospital is seeing people come in with wounds that are fatal, that would be fatal anywhere. Genocide looks like people being killed outright. They're also seeing patients with wounds that should not kill them. I'm seeing photos, I'm being consulted on patients by my colleagues, and our teams are treating patients with wounds that should never kill them, wounds that could easily be cleaned. Genocide looks like patients who should never die, who should be easily treated, who are being treated. Yesterday, actually in the morning hours, the dean of nursing was assassinated. One of the deans of nursing of the biggest schools in Gaza was assassinated. The entire layer of leadership of the medical institution, the deans of the medical school have been assassinated. The head of Shifa, my very close friend, Dr. Hani al-Haytham, was assassinated along with his wife, also a doctor, and their 5 children. So we see the entire leadership being killed. The medical system is being destroyed thoroughly, not just for today, but for years and generations to come. Genocide looks like destroying the future of Palestinians. And the last thing that we can say is that the Israelis have destroyed or severely damaged almost every piece of cultural, educational, governmental, civil society infrastructure that there is. The music theater, the symphony hall is not Hamas. The sewage system is not Hamas. These things are not Hamas. The hospitals are not Hamas. They're being destroyed. Genocide looks like removing everything that makes up an ingredient of civil society. So it really covers the entire gamut, all the way from the top to the bottom of what makes life possible and what makes life civilized. And that's what we're seeing in this genocide.
You had been working at Al-Shifa Hospital, is what you said. I just want to make sure I get that right. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the places that the Israeli military had accused of being a Hamas command center as a pretext for attacking it. In your experience there, can you speak to those claims that have not been provided, that no real evidence has been provided for?
Yeah, the claims are lies. That's obvious. Israel had its way with Shifa for 2 weeks at least, and were not able to give any evidence at all. In Nasser, it's the exact same thing. The Israelis are lying. On Anarwa, the Israelis are lying. When they hit Ahli, the Israelis were lying. The issue here is that the Israelis are pathological liars when it comes to these accusations of Palestinians. The Palestinians did not use their hospitals for any kind of military activity. I can tell you, obviously Palestinian society is rich and heterogeneous. And so if you were to go into the hospital and do anything that resembled military activity, doctors like me would protest it, would fight it. We would spot it. You can't hide anything in a place like Shifa Hospital. Shifa is packed. There was never one place that I couldn't go to, never one place that I didn't go to. I went all over the hospital because I loved exploring it. I loved seeing what was in the different places and talking to the people who were there. These experiences that unfortunately can't be repeated now if we were to go to Shifa today, because so much of it has been destroyed. There is no way that there was military activity in Shifa. I've never seen it. And I've been working there for, as you mentioned, over a decade. I'm one of the people as far as they're concerned. They would trust me. And I can tell you that if there was anything like that, I would have picked it up. And so would the other Palestinians, half of whom hate Hamas. They're not interested in being some kind of decoy or giving any cover to Hamas. I mean, half of the people in Gaza are Fatah, are supporters of Fatah. Half of them, let's say, are supporters of Hamas. And so there's no way that you could hide something like that. It didn't happen. The Israelis have such a rich history of lying. They've been caught red-handed multiple times, planting evidence that they claim is real, like a calendar, literally pointing at a baby bottle and saying that the baby bottle represents Hamas. It's nonsense. In Nasser, they're doing the exact same thing. We know they're lies. The problem here is that we as an international community are allowing the Israelis to desecrate a hospital, to kill patients in it, and to basically destroy an important health institution just on the basis of what we all know are lies. For example, in another hospital, similar sounding name, Nasr, there were babies in incubators, literally, who were lying there. The medical staff were told that they would be cared for by the Israelis, and they were evacuated. They were not allowed to take the patients with them. When finally, 17 days later, people were allowed to go back in, those same patients, I say patients, but babies, premature babies, were found rotting in their spots where they couldn't receive any care, where they died cold and alone.
Unspeakable. Can you talk a little bit more about, apologies, can you talk a bit more about the nature of Gaza and how Israel controls its borders, land and sea, and how that hamstrings medical personnel in their ability to provide care?
Why am I not in Gaza right now? I am an emergency doctor. I am trained in battlefield trauma. I've been working in this place for a long, long time, and I've worked in several other countries. I am not there because of a Israeli-led international blockade. All of those words are important. It is an Israeli blockade, but it is also an international blockade. There is a sea border. There is an Egyptian border. The Israelis have dominated every aspect of Palestinian life for decades. For decades. It is what one thinker, Jeffrey Halper, calls the matrix of control. And so, of course, there's a blockade. It is like the Israelis are obsessed with controlling Palestinian lives and Palestinian bodies. Dov Weisglass, one of the advisors to the Israeli government, put Gaza on what he called the Gaza diet. This was I think it was in 2007, I forget the exact time. He said, we don't think that the world will allow us to starve the Palestinian people, so we're going to put them on a diet. He called it the Gaza diet. I think it worked out to 2,100 calories per person allowed in, which of course means significantly less than that. There was malnutrition before this war. There were kids dying of preventable diseases before this war. I wasn't traveling to Gaza because everything was fine. I was traveling to Gaza because nothing was fine. And the Israelis controlled my entry. They would strip search me. They would humiliate me. They would arrest and deport me. I've been arrested by the Israelis probably a half dozen times at this point. They would abuse me. They would interrogate me. The best case scenario, a trip where I would thank my lucky stars for how easy it was, involved me being naked in a room for 2 hours, interrogated for another 2 to 3 hours, making my way over to Erez and being treated like cattle as I went through metal turnstiles, again being searched and interrogated. So, and by the way, that distance between Gaza and Tel Aviv is 60 kilometers. What's that, 40 miles? Yeah. It should not take 10, 12, 14 hours to make that journey. Sometimes it would take me, I would arrive and then they would say, no, you're not allowed in today. And that was it. Sometimes I'd try to exit and they would say the same thing. That's me, a Canadian. They have to treat me as though I'm white. They have to treat me differently from the Palestinians. The Palestinians got the worst treatment imaginable. Think of what's happening right now in Nasr and how they're being treated. Now, project that out into every other domain. So, for example, 75% of patients were denied medical treatment outside of Gaza, according to the WHO reports. The other 25%, in case you think they had it easy, had delays of, on average, 6 months before they received approval. Imagine, I'm trying to think, if my mother had cancer, and somebody told her, you're going to have to wait 6 months, best case scenario, so that you can go access treatment outside. It's a death sentence. It's a death sentence. It was a death sentence to hundreds of Palestinians every year. Hundreds of them. And on the southern border, of course, Egypt is complicit. However, they're a junior partner. They're not the senior partner in this. The senior partners are Israel and the United States. Money was hard to get in. Fuel was hard to get in. Food was hard to get in. Medical supplies were often banned. In fact, one of the projects I work on was to create medical devices inside Gaza. why would we do that? Why would we go through all that trouble? I mean, yes, sure, it's nice to 3D print some tourniquets, but if we could have, we would have bought them en masse. If we could have, we would have imported them like everywhere else in the world. The blockade was so thorough and so overbearing and so imposing that it affected every iota of life for over a decade in Gaza. It destroyed so many lives. It led to terrible unemployment, terrible malnutrition, terrible mental health. It led to the invention of a new term, chronic traumatic stress disorder. We used to always think, when I was studying, we studied post-traumatic stress disorder. Palestinians had to entertain the question, what if there is no post? What if the trauma never ends?
You haven't really mentioned, how you feel. You've undergone incredible trauma. You're a Palestinian Canadian. I know that, you're a professional and this is your medical expertise, but you've undergone torture, you've been shot, and you've now seen untold horrors. What is it like for you?
You're right. I'm suffering too. However, that suffering has to come in context. When I was tortured by the Israelis and got out, I got out in 3 weeks. I was only in jail for 3 weeks. Okay. When I got out, I was part of a cohort of Palestinians. 75% of Palestinians under the age of 30 have spent time in jail. Just think about that, in Israeli jail, of course. Just think about that number for a moment. That is a huge number. And that is just such a terribly unacceptable thing. And guess what? They don't have the Canadian embassy visiting them. They don't have the same rights to civil law as I do. Because it is an apartheid regime, there's a different military trial system for Palestinians. So yes, I was tortured, but you have to remember that torture, while they were doing it, they knew that I had a voice. They knew that there was an embassy that would come visit me. They knew that I had some power. With Palestinians, there's no such thing. The mistake that Dov Weisglass made when he designed the Gaza diet was thinking that the world was going to stop him if he tried to kill all the Palestinians through famine. And I think we shouldn't make that mistake again. We know the Palestinians the doctors right now who are taken from Nasser this week are being tortured in ways that I can't imagine, and I was tortured. I was in Israeli jails. And when I hear these stories, I can barely imagine. What they're doing. So yes, I've suffered. Sure, of course, that's true. Yes, I'm in pain. I'm in emotional pain. I'm in spiritual pain because I'm watching this killing and I'm watching the suffering. They are in pain because they are being killed. They are suffering because they are suffering, because they are actually the subjects. And so, yes, we feel a tremendous amount of empathy vicariously. That's true. It hurts. It hurts all of our souls to watch this. I think, though, the most important thing is to recognize that the Palestinians who are suffering, the Palestinians who are being tortured, they are heroes and they are steadfast. Truly, if the Palestinians had wanted to leave or to surrender, they could have done that by now. They haven't. What they have signaled to us in so many ways, repeatedly, is that they will only accept their dignity and their rights. And if that's not on the table, then they're going to continue to fight for them. So how dare I, sitting in the comfort of my home in Canada, how dare I feel sorry for myself? How dare I think that I don't have the energy to do the things that they're doing? I'm not sacrificing what they're sacrificing. Every time I go in there, I choose to go in there. They don't choose to go in there. They don't choose to subject their families to danger. They are in danger. What they do choose is to hold their head up high, to maintain that incredible dignity that they have, and to basically lead us in solidarity and lead us in seeing what it is that we have to do.
What is the status of things like anesthesia and basic medical supplies, saline bags? I mean, Nasser's no longer, there's no hospitals functioning. So this feels like almost a question that doesn't necessarily have a ton of teeth to it. But I guess before you were forced to leave or unable to return, what was that like in terms of medical supplies?
Yeah, so the medical supply situation is obviously poor. People might say to you that, oh, there are actually working hospitals in Gaza. There's technically the European General Hospital, and then there's a couple of, the European Gaza Hospital. There's Al-Najjar, which are two hospitals that haven't been thoroughly destroyed. They are not functional in any sense of the word that you and I would say a hospital is functional. They don't have any of the equipment. They don't have enough staff. They don't have a safe way to sort of bring in and discharge patients. So your statement that there are no working hospitals in Gaza is accurate. That is true. That is correct. And it is somewhat depraved that the international community is like, oh, they've destroyed 36 out of however many hospitals. No, the Israelis have now successfully destroyed every hospital. The medical system is not collapsing. The medical system is past collapsed. And it is only the heroic efforts of the medical staff there that is basically reviving a long dead medical system. What about the equipment? You're asking about the equipment? Well, if you want to use a piece of equipment, I hope it doesn't need electricity, because there's no electricity hardly anywhere. Hope it doesn't need batteries, because they are literally banned by the Israelis from entering. I hope it doesn't need, just like you said, sort of the equipment. Right now, there is some medical equipment going in. It's going in a very disorganized and irregular way. Anybody who gets in is able to smuggle a little bit of medical gear, is doing so. And that is happening. There are people who are really bravely trying to do it and are trying to bring in the medical gear. Obviously, I won't get into the details of that, but there is some supplies coming in. It's not nearly enough. And not only that, it's not making it where it needs to go. There is no contact between the south of Gaza and the north of Gaza. And so the main hospital, Shifa, there's been no contact with Shifa in I believe at this point it's weeks. So really you can't get any equipment up there. What does that make you as a doctor if you can't do anything for the patient? What does that mean when you can't even wash because there isn't clean water? There is no successful medical system there. However, the health situation always depends on what we call the determinants of health. And so from the get-go, I as a doctor cannot function if my patients don't come in with a chance at survival. That is to say, they're drinking clean water, they're eating some food. If they come in starving and in a famine type situation, which they are, then that means that almost any treatment, even if it was the top treatment, will not succeed or may not succeed. So we're talking again about a thorough collapse from top to bottom. You'd asked about the definition of genocide. Well, this is an implication of genocide. When there's genocide going on, you receive patients who should be survivable if they just had a little bit more body fat, who would be able to make it through if they had just a little bit more on them. Babies, for example, are dying because their mothers are malnourished and so they can't produce breast milk. So back to that question, we look at places like Nasser, which we're kind of talking about today, and these other places. Nasser obviously has no medical equipment, but again, it's microcosmic. It's a small example of what the rest of Gaza looks like. No equipment, dedicated, brave, courageous doctors doing their best, and patients who are dying when they shouldn't, while we all watch and do very close to nothing.
What is your message, Dr. Loubani, to Canadian leaders? I mean, thankfully, Canada has finally joined the call for a ceasefire. The United States, still leading the charge, just yesterday vetoed for a third time a permanent ceasefire resolution with its Security Council power in the United Nations. So what would be your message broadly to Canadian and then Western leaders in general?
I don't have much to say to them. I think that they have all proven themselves genocidal beyond any conception that I would have had. I'm grateful that the people in power are basically the closest that we can get to leftist governments, so that we don't think that this is actually a characteristic of the Republicans in the US or of the conservatives in Canada. We know that these genocidal tendencies run through the entire governmental and probably national systems. The United States supports genocide in a big way, and we can't pretend it's Trump this time. Canada supports genocide in a big way, and we can't pretend that it's Harper, the predecessor of our current prime minister. Trudeau claims to be a feminist. Trudeau claims to be on the left side of the spectrum. He's neither. He supports genocide. His government supports genocide. Canada's statement came, 135 days into this genocide? I'm reminded of something that Malcolm X said. Don't stick a knife into me 12 inches, pull it back 6 inches, and say, haven't we made progress? And that's what I say to the Canadians. They get no credit from me for now, when it is clearly obvious and when their own systems of control are threatened, for now saying, oh, okay, actually maybe we shouldn't support this so strongly. They're trying to save their backs. But I think what I would say to the leaders is that we will make you pay. We will make you pay. We're not going to forget that you supported genocide when election day comes. And I think our job as people in the West, we can't pick up arms and go fight with the Palestinians. It's very difficult to materially support the Palestinians. But what we can do is we can create a real cost to the government that rule over us. Because if we let the liberals in Canada or the Democrats in the United States get away with this, then the signal we're sending is that even genocide isn't going to cost you an election. So go right ahead and do what you're doing. Nothing will change for us if we allow that message to resonate with the people in power today.
Matt, did you want to add something? Can I ask? So your organization GLIA does a lot of work in Gaza and in the West Bank. I saw a link to a fundraiser to help for some supplies for your organization. Can you speak about that and what else people can do if they want to help medical efforts in Gaza right now, even though, of course, as you say, it's quite difficult?
Yeah, I think we can take it as a bit of a ladder. If people can go to Gaza right now, if they're able to join delegations, there's some medical delegations going in, go. There's almost no better way that you can help than being there and doing as much as you can, both in terms of providing relief and also in terms of conveying the message about what's happening. The Palestinians are screaming for us to listen. They want to convey the message. We know that the way that the world is set up is such that the Palestinians are not permitted their narrative. That's why I'm able to speak, for example, because even though I am also Palestinian, I'm able to speak in a way that doesn't offend people in the West. If you can go to Palestine, to the Gaza Strip, and of course to the West Bank too, because it's active, go, help. You can do things, you should do things. Go if you can and your situation permits. If not, then sure, supporting through donations, supporting by allowing other people to go, covering their shifts like my colleagues do for me, is also very, very useful. And so do that. GLIA is great, donate to it. Obviously, I believe in GLIA. That's an organization that I've worked with for a while, one that I founded. So yes, GLIA helps quite a bit. Right now, we're both making medical equipment and sending medical delegations into Gaza. So that's something that's important. There are other organizations like Medical Aid for Palestinians UK. In the US, there's lots of charitable organizations as well, like PCRF, Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and Mecca Middle East Children's Alliance, I think it's called. PAMA, Palestinian Association, Palestinian American Medical Association is also sending delegations, as are others. So support the organizations financially. I mean, I think that's great. And then the other big way for people to support is to immerse themselves both in the movement, in understanding what solidarity means, and in conveying that to the people around them. We have to keep raising awareness. We have to make sure that what the Palestinians are trying to teach us, we are learning as we go through this journey.
Well, we'll put a link to the GLIA, and honestly, send us whatever you think is useful tools, and we'll put a link to that in the description, wherever people are listening to or watching this, and at majority.fm. Dr. Tarek Loubani, you know, I'm sure it gets a little bit trite, or perhaps, you know, you don't want to hear it, but you are a hero, and I feel very honored to have spoken to you today. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. I mean, that means a lot to me. Yeah, you're right. I don't want to hear that, because when I really think of heroes, what I think of are the doctors like Dr. Khalid Assir and his many colleagues who we are afraid to name because they might be targeted for that. Now, I think of the patients. I think of the children who somehow still are able to wear a smile despite everything that they're seeing, not despite of what's happening to them, but because they want to make sure that they continue in the resistance of life, which has always been something that Palestinians have chosen and wanted to do. So, you know, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. I thank you so much for your kind words, and I want to sort of project them out to the so many brave and heroic medical personnel who are on the ground, and the Palestinians who are supporting them, and everybody who's fighting hard for the dignity of Palestinians.
Thank you so much. Hope to talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're gonna head into the fun half, and the free,
Good job, Emma.
free part of this program. Thanks. I don't even, like, I can't even imagine the bravery. I don't even know what to add to that, but the links for GLIA are in the description here, and we're going to go into the fun half, and we'll talk more Gaza, but we'll have some fun too, because we are being joined by RM Brown, which will be very, very fun.
We're gonna quickly shift vibes, I think, in about 10 minutes.
Yes.
Give ourselves a little bit of time.
I just need a little runway.
But yeah, I mean, you know, between the hospital, it's been interesting because, you know, this isn't the first doctor we've talked to, and the medical lens, you know, I don't know. I think there's a reason that it's so often a setting for drama, and to see it just in like American fiction or whatever in TV shows, but to see like actual people struggling, and to hear about like what high trauma incident after high trauma incident after high trauma incident, like doctors who work in the most difficult ERs in over here have no, like, it's not the same thing. And like, you know, we haven't even really touched on the horrific, like maybe the worst images I can remember seeing of, you know, besides just gore that we're seeing, but of hundreds of people running towards relief trucks.
We can maybe get to that. I mean, CNN is finally doing a report showing how Israel is firing on food trucks and then also blocking them. And so the Western press is starting, moving at a glacial pace, but moving towards seeing some of the reality right now.
But it's like, you see people like Sam Harris talk about, well, if Israel wanted to commit a genocide, they could kill everyone. They've displaced millions of people. They like, so, okay, whatever the current death toll is, however many tens of thousands we're at, the scary thing is like, I remember when it was like 10,000, and it's like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And now we look back at that fondly. And you look at the conditions now, and it's like, Jesus, like, are we going to look at 30,000 as like, would have been nice to have done something a little bit different, maybe have a little bit more urgency. Yeah, it's horrifying.
Would have been nice. Yep. Would have been nice if people just familiarized themselves with the facts of Israel's occupation before claiming this was some war between two actors.
And he's right about, I hadn't considered the Trudeau thing, but having Biden and the Democrats in office and being this intransigent about it, it is a moment for education.
And yeah.
And and how
And radicalization. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, exactly. And I
for me, this is I'm never going to forget this time in terms of how it changed my view of politics.
No, it's interesting to note him like having the same trajectory we are as media people, but as a doctor, saying like maybe there was some sort of debate prior to this. Not one that was terribly persuasive, but like, okay, sure. No, it's over. That's out the window. There's no more of that at all. And I mean, we'll see how over this argument is, I guess, with the Finkelstein.
That will actually be a fun way to talk about this. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning had Val Labor Port fellas on, talking about kind of what Sam was talking about with the Goldstein in the first interview about the National Labor Relations Board, and also about the UAW organizing the South. Really, really good conversation with the boys. So check that out.
And on ESPN, Bradley and I talked about the NBA All-Star Game, the Stadium Series games for the NHL, and also just did a little bit of a fun draft between the two of us, most dominant 21st century athletes. We'll be joined by RM Brown in the fun half. The number is 64625. Well, guys, I mean, it's 1:40. We're not getting to calls today. Sorry. And we also have a guest.
Yeah.
We'll get to calls tomorrow, but apologies. We will see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them.
Oh. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
are back.
We are back, and we are joined making a hard pivot to fun with the always fun RM Brown. How you doing, buddy? What an act to follow.
Hey, Emma. Yeah, I know. Amazing interview. Glad you made it through that one. I was telling you, I don't think I would have had to step away a few times from that one. So good on you for that.
Appreciate that. What's going on your show? You've got to familiarize our audience that, I mean, they already should be familiar